So you've been working out for a while, right? Let's say you've been working out for a couple years, right? Doing resistance training in this instance. And so you realized all of your newbie gains already, right? And then let's say all of a sudden it seems like out of nowhere, it looks like the faucet that was, pouring out all the gains was just cut off, right? And now progress is harder to come by. You realize then at some point that, you've pretty much been doing the same workout for a while now, but you're also wondering why you don't have as many of the gains as you once had, right? Now, if you've been hanging with me long enough, you already know what the issue is, right? What are they missing? This particular person in this case is missing progressive overload, right? And according to the internet, progressive overload is a form of strength training that allows you to progress. It's a little redundant, but it's a little different than that, right? Progressive overload is not necessarily a form of strength training. It's a method in which you train, period. In a general sense, what progressive overload is incremental changes to your workouts, and they have to be somewhat consistent. So consistent incremental changes to your workouts that allow you to progress towards your goals. For lack of better terms, is how you go Super Saiyan. But progressive overload is absolutely necessary to continue to move forward. Now, what do I mean by progressive overload in a physical sense? In the physical sense, rather, a more technical definition would be it's a principle in fitness that involves gradually increasing the stress that's placed on the body in efforts to progress in various areas of fitness, whether that be strength, hypertrophy, or endurance. You could basically do this you could do this in two different ways. You could do this aerobically and anaerobically, right? So meaning you could do this with your resistance training, but you could also do this with your cardio. You can do this with your running, progressive overload. That principle, that method applies for both, right? So it works because it basically stresses your body and forces it to adapt. Now, the stress that you place on your body, you have to be very careful there, right? It has to all be in balance, right? So the amount of stress that I would place on my body would be very different than the amount of stress that you would place on your body in terms of, trying to grow and trying to get these gains, right? But if done properly, your body adapts, and these adaptations cause you to be better, right? So it essentially ensures that you don't hit a plateau. So when you hit that plateau, which we all do, we have to consider first the method of progressive overload that we're applying, if we're applying it at all. And what this does, this is a really good principle or principle or method, however you want to call it. I typically call it a principle that works really well, not only in just your physical fitness, but it works in your mental fitness and your emotional fitness and your spiritual fitness. It works all the way around. It's a very, very interesting principle to apply to other aspects of your life outside of just your workouts, right? Therefore, progressive overload is a core component of the SCAL method. So let's start with the physical fitness side. We'll start there because that's the easiest, that's the most well-known, right? And that's the easiest place to start and pick up from, okay? So what are the components that we want to manipulate to, follow this principle, right? The main components that I typically manipulate in my training, in my coaching of others, I'll start with weight. I'll just list them off and then I'll explain each one, right? So and this is as it pertains to anaerobic training or, resistance training, right? I'll change the weight or the resistance the number of reps or sets, which kind of loosely equates to volume, right? Rest time, and I'll play around with the complexity. Okay, so let's start with the weight. The weight's the easiest one to explain, right? If you're lifting, let's just say you're doing a barbell bench press. Barbell bench press, you have nothing on the bar. Let's put it that way. It's the easiest way to explain it. Nothing on the bar. You're doing barbell bench press. You're doing 3 sets of 8. Okay, cool. To apply progressive overload to that, you would do 3 sets of 8, 1 week. The next week, again, this is a very basic example. The next week, add 5 pounds to each side. So now you're benching 10 pounds. Well, you're technically benching. If you have an Olympic barbell, you're benching 55 pounds. But you're adding an additional 10 pounds. Then you're going for 3 sets of 8. And then a week after that, you're adding a little bit more weight to it, and you're pressing from there. So the one way you can progress is by adding more weight. It's placing more stress on the body, and it's forcing your body to adapt. That's typically what happens when you go for those newbie gains, right? The amount that you're able to lift from beginning of your lifting to like after or to the end of your newbie gains. I'm probably going to say that a gazillion times too. But the amount that you're able to lift jumps significantly, right? And so you're able to progress a lot at that beginning portion, especially as you get your nervous system more acquainted with the weights that you're lifting, right? But that's the easiest way to apply progressive overload, right? Add the weight, right? Or you could do more reps and or more sets. So it's just more repetitions. And essentially, by saying doing more sets, you're actually doing more reps, right? So I just kind of have that as reps in parentheses sets, right? Ultimately, how many times are you lifting this thing? So again, back to the bench press example, I would do 1 week, we're doing 3 sets of 8, just the bar, right? And then the next week we want to do 3 sets of 10. We just added reps on there. And then maybe the week after that, we'll do 4 sets of 10. All we're really doing is adding additional reps to that, but that's a way to progress as well. When I'll get to how they kind of interplay with each other a little bit later on as well. The next one that you can, play with and manipulate is rest time, right? So back to the barbell example, doing barbell bench press, nothing on the bar, you're doing 3 sets of 8. But in between each set for the first week, you're taking, let's just say, a minute rest. And then you're going back. So you do 1 set of 8, take 60 seconds rest, and then you go for another set of 8, 60 seconds rest, and then you do it again. Okay. The following week, you say, we'll take it down to 30 seconds rest. So you cut your rest in half. So now you're doing 1 set of 8, 30 seconds rest. Another set of 8, 30 seconds rest. And then that last set of 8. That's a way you can progress. So take less rest, recover a little bit less, and be able to push these reps out still, right? Now, the last one is typically the one I have the most fun with, and that's progress the complexity of a particular exercise, right? Truth be told, the barbell bench press is a pretty technical exercise, and it's actually a harder one to do and a harder one to fully do right and grasp. Now, it's not impossible, obviously. It's just, I find it very interesting that one of the first exercises that somebody will go to was a barbell bench press. Let's start with maybe a dumbbell one. Maybe start with a dumbbell floor press, right? Something like that, just so we can get the proper mechanics in the proper form. And potentially save your shoulders when you're 40 to 50 or plus, right? That's typically what I would end up doing. I'll start you off with a floor press, 3 sets of 8, and say like, okay, the bar weighs 45 pounds. So let's just say we put on 2.5s on each side and we make that thing 50. So we have a barbell that's 50 pounds. But instead of going straight to the barbell with 50 pounds, I'll say, hey, look, give me a floor press with 25-pound dumbbells. Start there, 3 sets of 8. Now we're going to go onto the barbell bench press, and we're going to do that as well. Some people actually find it to be the opposite. Some people find that the dumbbells are harder to manipulate or harder to work with because they force your stabilizers to work more. throughout my experience, I actually found that it was more people found that the barbell bench press was harder than a dumbbell one. Dumbbell one, you get ready and then, go for it. To each your own. But the point is, you want to, in order to progress, just do harder variations of the said exercise, right? So I guess I could give you another example. Would be like, you're doing 3 sets of 8 just bodyweight squats, and then you progress to 3 sets of 8 of goblet squats, and then you progress to 3 sets of 8 of hack squat machine, and then you progress to 3 sets of 8 barbell back squat. And not everybody can barbell back squat either. So that's another. So that would be a typical progression if you were just going to progress the exercise itself. And now here's the thing: you could also progress the frequency, but that's kind of like an offshoot of how many sets and reps and how much weight you're doing. So it's kind of like an offshoot of volume. Some people, though, consider progressive overload to be had in the amount of workouts that you do over the course of the week. I can see a pathway for that, but I count that mostly as the sets and the reps. So if you're doing, 3 sets of 8, and that's what you do for your barbell bench press, and that's working your chest and all that fun stuff for that week, adding another day that will give you another 3 sets is basically just adding more reps. So that's basically the way I look at it. But I understand if you keep it separate. Now, all of these things, the weight, the reps, the sets, the rest time, and the complexity, you can all play with those, and they all play together, right? So, and in most programs, that's what you'll see. You'll see the most common ones are playing with the weight and then the reps, right? So you do 3 sets of 8 at a particular weight, and then you say, okay, now let's go to 3 sets of 10 at a particular weight. Okay, now we go to 3 sets of 12 at a particular weight. And then at that point, they increase the weight and they go back down to 3 sets of 8. But this time is at a higher weight. So it's like double progression there. I mean, that's par for the course, so to speak, when it comes to programming for trainers. But when it comes to progressive overload for everybody doing it, right? So truthfully, the best trainers, and it's just an aside, the best trainers actually they can do this in their sleep, right? So I guess just a little bit of advice for when you're looking for a trainer, if you're looking for a trainer, or if you're looking for, that information, doing that research on your own, all that fun stuff, make sure you have that idea down, because that's really the base. That's very basic, but it's the base of all program creation, right? Because if you're not progressing, if you're not going to do progressive overload, especially when it comes to resistance training, you're not going to grow. You're not going to get stronger. You're not going to get better. You'll be exactly the same, because our bodies, again, are lazy. Rather, worded differently, our bodies are looking for the easiest, fastest, most efficient way to do something so that it doesn't have to spend as much resources getting that thing done. You have to be careful, though. You have to be careful when applying this principle. You have to do it gradually, right? And that's the progressive part of progressive overload, right? You can't make these jumps too big, right? Whether that be in weight, you'll just, the bigger the jump in weight, reps, sets, complexity, or rest time, the closer you get to, or the higher the injury risk, right? So you don't want to increase, or you don't want to progress too far past your ability, okay? So, and that's also the value of a really good trainer. A really good trainer will help you keep all that in balance without you having really to think about it, right? And again, the best trainers always err on the side of, I would rather do too little and add than do too much and put you out of commission, okay? So you have to be careful there, okay? And you have to apply it gradually, of course, to avoid injury and avoid overtraining, and which means you should be tracking what you do, right? how do you know if you're overtraining, or how do you know if you're progressing if you're not actually tracking it, right? So I did 3 sets of 8 of barbell bench press at 45 pounds, which is nothing on the bar, right? And then I try and do the same thing again, but I was like, wait, did I have weight on there? Right. Like, you don't want to have any questions or anything like that. And then a lot of times what I found, a lot of people get that mixed up, where it's just like, look, last week I had 2 plates on there. It was like, 2 plates on there, really? Okay. And then they figure it's like, wait, was it 2 plates, or was it 2 45s or 2 35s? Right? Don't leave that up for any debate. Track it so that you can actually see it, look at it, and then plan accordingly from there. Remember that progressive overload strategically places stress on your body in a way that causes your body to adapt. And I want to hone in on that word strategically. There's a strategy applied to this. Any good program is actually a good strategy that we're taking or undertaking here to get you to where you desire to be. This is largely, again, a physical fitness principle, but it applies in every aspect of your life. So let's jump to the mental side here. We already, hopefully, and if you don't know already, I have a whole bunch of videos on the back end here of what it is to train your mental side of the mental side of your being. Like, how do you train to have better mental health? How do you improve upon your mental fitness? Okay. So applying progressive overload to your thinking, let's draw the parallel first real quick, right? So you have the aerobic or anaerobic workouts physically, and you would apply this principle to those to your workouts, but you would also apply this principle to your mental workouts, which would be what exactly? It would be your meditation. It would be those thought exercises. It would be how you frame things. It would be the skills that you learn and undertake, right? Those are the things. That's how you train for better mental fitness, right? It's training, and it's understanding, is doing those exercises to beef up your critical thinking, right? All of those things come into play. So progressive overload is a perfect principle to apply to your thinking as well. Okay. So the aim on the mental side is to improve focus, to improve memory, to improve logical and rational thought, and overall cognitive ability, right? So the progressive overload for the mind is a gradual and consistent working of the brain. Now, here are the components to manipulate if you're following this principle, right? 1, the difficulty, and when I say, so I'll, again, wrap them off real quick, and then I'll explain each one. So 1 is difficulty, 2 is time, and 3 is volume. Now, it's interesting. So we're talking about mental workouts here. We're manipulating the difficulty, we're manipulating the time, and we're manipulating the volume of what? Right. Now, hang with me. So we're manipulating the difficulty of tasks, right? So there's, you know, those people who like to, and you might be one of them, who like to do puzzles, right? Puzzles are really good for you. I remember my grandma used to do these crossword puzzles all the time. Now, I can't stand crossword puzzles. I don't know why, though. There's nothing against them. I'm just sitting there like, it just doesn't, I guess it doesn't do it for me. But there's so many people I know that that's their jam. And I get it. It's actually good for you, though. It's good for you. So, you could do a simple crossword puzzle, and that's fine. Then you can increase the difficulty and start doing some of these, gazillion word crossword puzzles, the ones that are really hard to find and the ones that are really have really difficult words in it. Now you're really cooking here, right? Because then that's training your mind. That's actually helping your mental fitness, especially as you get older. It helps with focus, it helps with cognitive ability, but you get that. Okay. So by increasing the difficulty of tasks, that is increasing the stress that is placed on your brain. Gradually, that is also forcing you to adapt to the increased stress, thereby making you better mentally. That's the first one. The second one, the time. So you manipulate the time. Let's take the crossword puzzle example again. We have a crossword puzzle, you do it regularly, and you have fun with it. Now, next week, you want to do a crossword puzzle, now you want to do it timed. Put yourself on a timer. Now see how quickly you can think, how quickly you can process, right? There's great value in that as well, being able to process logical, rational thoughts, but do it quickly enhances your cognitive ability overall as well, right? So then you go to the volume. How much are you really thinking about? What's the nature of these ideas that you're trying to? So how many crossword puzzles are you doing? Right? Some people do them every morning. They can't get their day started without them. There you go, right? Other people do it maybe once a week, every now and again. Increase the amount of time you're doing it, or increase the volume, how many crossword puzzles you're doing, right? So this idea of progressive overload applies to your brain health as well, your mental health as well, your thinking as well. Another example, and this is kind of a little, oh no, it's not out there, but another example actually is like a debate team. People who debate, people who dig into the research, find stuff, and then come up with arguments to support it. Because any good debater also comes up with arguments that are against what they're trying to, promote, right? So that is a really good thought exercise. Research something as if you're about to debate it, right? And that actually helps your mental health. Not only will you learn more, but you will also improve upon your logical, rational thought, how quickly you could do it, in your cognitive ability and your focus, all of that stuff, right? So those are a few tips to apply progressive overload to your mental fitness, right? And that leads directly into your emotional fitness, because remember, how do we train our emotions? We train our emotions through our thinking, through our framing of what happens to us, or through our framing of what we experience, right? So you would apply progressive overload to your thinking, but the difference here is you're not applying it to your thinking to improve cognitive ability, but you're applying it to situations that are highly emotionally charged, right? A la trauma in the past, difficult situations that are actively going on right now. And so this one is a little bit tricky, right? Because you ultimately want to find a balance when you're using progressive overload, absolutely. But it's hard to apply progressive overload to your emotions in a sense that you don't want to cause emotionally negative things to happen, right? So it's kind of a weird thing to do if it's like, I'm training my emotions, so I'm going to go cuss somebody out because that's going to help me deal and get stronger emotionally, right? Life does enough of that, right? So the good thing is you're able to train your thinking, and while you're training your thinking, you're also training your emotions in that sense, right? So it works out without much extra effort there, okay? It's just you're dealing with more emotionally charged situations when you're trying to train your emotions and apply progressive overload to your emotions. So then that takes us to our spiritual progressive overload. And that one's a tricky one as well, but you know what? I just thought about something. So let me pull back a little bit. Let me go back to the emotional fitness and applying progressive overload to that, because you also train your emotions through the process of trying to increase your emotional intelligence, right? So I don't want that to be lost here, right? You're training your emotions, trying to label and identify all the feelings, all of them, wherever, right? So you're trying to beef up your emotional intelligence So whatever that you can do to help you better identify and label your emotions, that ultimately adds to you applying progressive overload to that situation, or applying progressive overload to your emotions, right? But also, there's two other things that are kind of major in this one, right? You also want to change your internal dialogue. And that's a practice, and that's a thing that's hard unto itself, right? You want to change your internal dialogue here when trying to apply progressive overload to your emotions. So in that process, you're actually applying progressive overload, okay? And the same thing with journaling, right? Because what journaling does is, and it's actually a great practice. So you're basically, I would equate journaling to a physical fitness, like a weightlifting session. So journaling is working out for your emotions. It's also working out for your mind, but it is very, very, and I say it's very good for working out your emotions because what journaling does, it forces you to stop and reflect. Okay. And that's the process in which you reframe or frame and reframe the situations and think differently about it, right? So journaling is the chest day of your, for lack of better terms, journaling is the back day for your emotions. I don't know if that made sense. We're going to move on. So there's a spiritual progressive overload, and the focus there is obviously prayer and reading and fellowship and worship. Okay, those are the main components that we deal with in dealing with progressive overload. Spiritually, right? And of course, I'm coming at it from a Christian perspective. I don't think I need to continue to say that, but maybe I do. But we want to gradually increase the stress, even though, once again, this is another situation in which life does that already for us. But we want to gradually take on that stress, or gradually increase the intensity and stay consistent with it enough so that you can build up and build into more challenging practices. So a perfect example of this would be quick prayers that you have throughout the day. And, you wake up in the morning, thank you, Lord, for waking me up. And you keep moving, push it, you get on the road, you get to work. Thank you, Lord, for getting me to work safely, right? And those quick prayers, right? And it's like, oh, somebody's going through something real quick. Oh, Lord, please protect them, help them. And then you're off, right? Those are quick prayers. That's how you would kind of typically start. But then how you basically, the progressive overload would basically allow you to build from the quick prayers to the fasted prayers for hours, right? Where you're bowing down in worship for a long time and you're fasted, right? That is another thing unto itself, right? But it starts with quick prayer, typically, right? Especially as you grow and as you grow in your understanding and grow in your I don't want to say worship, but grow in your relationship, right? That progressive overload applied that way then allows you to pray longer, pray differently, pray with more fervor, right? So progressive overload applies to your spirituality as well, right? So that's progressive overload, and I'm pretty sure you got a little bit more than what you thought you was going to get here when I said, hey, I'm going to talk about progressive overload, right? Because that principle is a great principle and it applies to so many different arenas, so many different avenues, so many different aspects of your being, right? But remember what the key is here. The key for any progressive overload is it has to be gradual so that you don't cause injury or break something, right? Whether that be physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, right? It has to be a gradual thing. And The goal is to place enough stress on your body, enough stress on your mentality, enough stress on your emotionality, enough stress on your spirituality to grow. Okay? All right, let's keep going. So if you like this segment, here's another one for you. Click over here. And if you want the entire podcast, go this way. Click on that one right there. And once again, I appreciate you. All right, you take it easy.